What is going on, guys? So today we're back with another deep dive, and today we're kind of continuing a small little trend here. This week is basically going to turn into Dragon Week. We are looking at a ground and dragon type Pokemon. So Flygon maxing out at 2661, pretty big CP there, but with a 0-1 attack, 15 defense, and 9 stamina. Yeah, I double checked, that is the correct IV spread. At level 21.5 actually does yield a clean 1500, which is the most stat product available to you inside of the Great League. If we compare Flygon up against the entire Timeless Cup and we actually take a look at bulk and stat product, 1/12 in bulk and 96th in stat product, here again, nothing really good to write home about. It's just kind of like middle of the road, probably on the lesser side of middle of the road. Now, of course, all of this does come from our base stats with a 205 on attack, 168 in defense, and a 190. As you can kind of tell, these numbers don't really make a great Flygon. It basically comes down to the moveset that we choose here, which there are quite a few moves to look through, so let's go ahead and jump into these. We do have two fast moves here with Dragon Tail and Mudshot. Dragon Tail gonna clock in at 3 1/3 energy per turn for 3 damage per turn, but it does get stabbed, which means it does bump up to 3.6. Mudshot for 4.5 energy per turn, we do get 1.5 damage per turn. After stab, it does get bumped up to 1.8. So I checked a few simulations on like which one of these kind of make more sense. Is it worthwhile to sacrifice the energy gains of Mudshot to get some more damage from Dragon Tail? Not really. In a lot of situations, you really want to just cut down the amount of time that it takes you to get to your charge moves, and Mudshot is definitely the move to do that. Even though we are forfeiting a ton of damage, we are basically going to be able to get to these charge moves faster, which kind of makes up a little bit of the difference. Now, speaking of charge moves, of course, as you can see here, we do have a ton of these. Dragon Claw, Earthquake, Stone Edge, Frustration, Return, maybe, and Earth Power. I guess you could, in theory, have some that have Return, maybe. I don't know. I still don't fully, like, embrace the whole Team Rocket thing. It just... So if you have Return on it, I'll just go ahead and say Return isn't going to do a whole lot for you here either way. But let's go over the ones that we know that we can get a hold of, like Dragon Claw, 35 energy for 50 damage at a 1.43. After stab, it does get bumped up to 60 for the damage and a 1.71 on the damage per energy ratio. Earthquake, 65 energy for 120 damage at a 1.85. Always an amazing move. 144 after stab on the damage for a 2.22 on the damage per energy ratio, which is still quite amazing. Stone Edge for 55 energy, we get 100 damage for a 1.82 on the damage per energy ratio. No stab there. Frustration we can get for 40 energy, 10 damage at a 0.25, literally worthless. And then we have Earth Power. For 55 energy, we get 90 damage at a 1.64. After stab, it is a 108 for a 1.96 on the efficiency. Okay, so when I sat down to do this deep dive, I was like, you know what? Earth Power has to make more sense than Earthquake here because it is going to be faster and it's not going to be nearly as efficient in all scenarios, but it is actually going to end up being a little bit faster, and it does have that added benefit of the debuff, so it's got to be better, right? Actually, no. It ends up being that Earth Power actually does worse than Earthquake. And it's weird, because that's not what I natively thought, but I guess the extra damage from Earthquake just makes it one of those closing moves, especially when you don't have any shields. It really does start to shine. So then I was like, okay, well, there you go. Mudshot, Dragon Claw, Earthquake seems pretty nice. But then I took a look at Stone Edge. And at first, Stone Edge and Earthquake had the exact same win ratio in the meta up against the 1v1 shield scenario. So I was like, huh. It's kind of interesting. I wonder what's different here. So I took a look, and the only thing that's actually different is that Stone Edge actually helps you inch out a few more matchups. While you do forfeit a couple of matchups with Stone Edge rather than Earthquake, a lot of the draws that you encounter with Earthquake actually get converted to wins, and then some of the wins get converted to losses. It's kind of weird. I'll show you the histogram. For what it's worth, Earthquake is still going to be an amazing move to run, especially if you want to kind of have that extra just 144 damage after stab on a ton of different Pokemon. That's amazing. Or if you'd like something a little bit faster, you can even go with Earth Power rather than Earthquake, get that debuff added benefit there, plus you'd have a way faster move. So Flygon can kind of be shifted into a couple of different directions here, but let's actually take a look at our shielding scenarios. Up against the entire cup, starting out in the 0 versus 0, we do have a 61.8, which is actually really good. Looking at a, even shield scenario, I like to see at least a 50% there, so pretty nice. The 2 versus 0 is a 98.4, which is just fine. The 0 versus 2, we like to see at least 10% here, and Flygon achieves that with a 13.6, so looking really nice. And then in the 2v2 up against the entire cup, we actually end with a 67%. So that's actually really good. So what that actually ends up meaning is that Flygon could possibly do better in the scenarios where you open with it rather than closing, because when myself and my opponent have 2 shields each, we actually have a higher win percentage rather than if myself and my opponent don't have any shields to use. Now let's actually shift into the meta here, where we're actually going to take a look at the 0 versus 0, which is a 38.5, so not quite to that 50%. It is kind of getting close, but unfortunately just not quite there. The 1 versus 0 is an 89.7, which is respectable. It's not amazing, but it is respectable. In the 0 versus 1, we actually end up with a 15.4%, which is actually really insane. I really like that number there. And then lastly, in the 1 versus 1, we drop down to a 48.7, which is not ideal. Like I said, at least 50% is what I really hope for, but here again, it does also show that in that 1 versus 1, we do a whole lot better than in the 0 versus 0, which means that Flygon does like his shields. So we actually do take that 48.7% in the meta and we tear apart what our wins and our losses are. Let's take a look here. I'm going to disappear for a second. We do have all of our wins on the screen right here with Ninetales, Castform, Sunny Form, by the way, Torkoal, Charizard, Skuntank, Typhlosion, Haunter, Dustox, Venomoth, Wormadam in its plant form, Beedrill, Blaziken, Lantern, Frostlass, Drapion with Infestation, Victreebel, Muck, Banette, and Glalie actually rounding out the wins for us there. So it's very interesting to actually see Glalie being a win, whereas you would kind of assume that Glalie is probably going to be a hard loss considering it is going to be using some ice types. Fairly interesting. Now if we do move on to the losses here, of course we do tie up against ourselves. I've got us up there in the top right hand corner. We do have Swampert, Sceptile, Celio, Venusaur, Gloom, Lapras, Ivysaur, Blastoise, Dragonair, Kingdra, Quagsire, Shelgon, Whiscash, Castform in its rainy form, Blossom, Ludicolo, Meganium, Drapion with Ice Fang, and Castform, which is the snowy form, rounding out our losses there. Now something important, kind of like we talked about in the Dragonair video, in the mirror we're going to have these awkward movesets where sometimes we may end up cutting performance with one moveset to gain the edge in the mirror, but with Flygon, just like we had a scenario with Dragonair, it works out very similar. PvPoke is actually utilizing Mudshot, Dragon Claw, and Earth Power for Flygon. So even if we carry Stone Edge, it's not like we're losing the mirror to win more matches up against the meta. We're actually tying in the mirror just as well. So I'm going to fade back into the screen here and we're actually going to transition this into the ripe and rotten section. So taking a look at all of the losses that we had in the meta, let's tear these down into a few different categories and try to pick out which Pokemon we do really bad up against and kind of what we would want to pair with Flygon to help us counter those. So one of the worst categories that we can go up against as Flygon is, to no one's surprise, the ice typing. Celio, Lapras, and the snowy form of Castform are going to be really, really bad times for us. So, of course, one of the easiest things to counter ice would be fire, right? Things like Torkoal, Charizard, or Ninetales would actually be a really good addition to the team to kind of help mitigate those ice-type Pokemon that we really have a hard time with. Another category that we have a big problem with is the grass type, things like Ivysaur, Blossom, and Ludicolo. Initially I thought, well, fire types, they'll take care of those too, but it's not that cut dry. Because Ludicolo actually does exist right now, we kind of need something that could possibly cover him as well. And yeah, fire types will do just fine in general up against the grass types, but what if we want to prepare for everything possible? Well, another thing that all these Pokemon have in common is a weakness to the poison typing. So things like Muk, Skuntank, and Beedrill could actually do really well here because they do have an out up against not only the core grass types that are basically just going to have a weakness to ice or fire or anything like that, but they also have a way to get through to Ludicolo, who does carry the water typing. The last category that we actually have here is going to be a common one for this week, just basically because they're so good. The ground typing, but mainly the mud boys. Things like Swampert, Quagsire, and Whiscash give us a ton of problems. One of the best things to utilize up against those, like we talked about in the Dragonair video, would be the grass types. Things like Ivysaur, Blossom, and Ludicolo could actually be really good here. The things that are going to be able to take advantage of the super duper weakness that the mud boys do carry to the grass typing is always going to be appreciated here. So that is actually going to be it for Flygon today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys are enjoying the Timeless Cup because it's something new. It's something fresh. I've already completed a couple of deep dives for this week. I'm super into it. Yeah, I'm having a good time so far. So I'm actually just going to jump straight into the next deep dive, which will come out on Friday, so 2 days from now, depending on when you're watching this. But yeah, so that is actually it. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. Always remember that if you want to dictate what deep dive we looked at next, make sure to jump down to the Discord, vote. If you need any help, just tag me. Anybody in there basically knows how to do it at this point, but if you needed any help for any reason, don't hesitate to tag us. We'll be happy to help. That is actually going to be it. Thank you guys. I'm going to go ahead and head out and see you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that, but if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below about the video. I do highly appreciate you guys watching. If you guys want to support me in any way, there are several links down in the description for Patreon, joining the community here on YouTube, or even just directly PayPal if that's your thing. I greatly appreciate everyone's name that's on screen, as you guys have showed some sort of support outside of just viewing the videos, and I thank you guys. You don't understand from the bottom of my heart. So until our next video, guys, I will catch you then. Finally.